Welcome to Uncharted, your sidekick for life, Season 2, Episode 7. I'm Natalie Peyton, joined by my co-host, Dan Dillard and Dr. Leon Vanstone. We're so excited to dive into today's episode with a fantastic guest, Scott Thomas. Scott is a longtime friend of ours and a true business person. He's the co-founder of Mod Intelliky, where he's been helping tech companies with their digital transformation for over 15 years. But he's done so much more, starting other agencies and even dipping into private equity. We'll hear all about his journey from being an aspiring actor and veterinarian in high school to where he is today. Special thanks to our Gen Z contributors, including Sarah, who asked what she could do right now, work-wise, to prepare for her future, and Santino, who posed a question to Neil deGrasse Tyson to ask how to manage work-life balance. It's a great conversation, so let's get started.
Welcome to Uncharted, your sidekick for life. Episode 7, Season 2. Season 2, Episode 7. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you.
Welcome, Leon.
Dan, have you forgotten how to count?
No, sometimes. Depends on how busy I am during the day. It's like, who's on first?
Who's on first?
Yeah,
How's on first?
exactly. Well, I said your name, but let's go ahead and do some intros.
Thank you, Dan. Hello, everybody. I'm Natalie Peyton. I am an actor, comedian, and podcast person, Natalie, and of course, co-host of Uncharted, your sidekick for life.
And hello, everyone. I am Dr. Leon Vanstone, rocket scientist, storyteller, and entrepreneur, among other things.
I am Dan Dillard, among other things, co-host of founding Up Uncharted, and what was he? Co-founder of Founding Up. See, there's so many things going through my head, as well as media background, finance background, all that kind of stuff.
It's a Friday afternoon.
It's a Friday.
Yeah.
It's been a long week. But excited to have a friend on the podcast. Scott Thomas in the house.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm excited for this
Thanks
conversation.
for being here.
I was going to say, Dan, I don't think you've met anyone that wasn't your friend, so I'm not sure how anyone
I
was
say
had
that
it here.
all the time, right? I got a friend in the house. I do. Right? Scott and I know each other for 6, 7 years, 8 years.
It might be more than that.
Dan's
I
a
can't
Leo.
mark
That's
it.
a good chunk of time.
Dan, you're the best person I've met to make and keep connections and friendships. It's just your nature. He's also a Leo, everybody, which helps. But
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure
Right?
that Leo did that, but okay.
yeah,
Cool. I like
you're
it.
just like a people person.
Like a fire Leo or a water Leo?
Well said. My wife is a Leo. Fire, for sure.
Fire,
You know.
for sure.
yeah.
But, well, Mama always said, she had a few sayings. And one, never speak poorly about anybody, right? You had nothing to say, keep your mouth shut.
hmm
And 2, never burn any bridges, because you just never know what help you'll need down the road.
hmm
And so that's how I build my relationships. It's like, if there's a reason to have a relationship, we're going to have a relationship for a long time. So,
I love that. That's cool.
but let's start and talk about and learn more about Scott, because we did a interview in Founding Austin on years ago about you and your
That was 6 or 7 years ago. I think.
yeah. And so for the audience here, let's just talk about that. Let's talk about what you do now. I like to do this kind of arc. What you do now, and then let's go back to high school and figure out what you wanted to do then, and kind of go through that path.
See how things have changed.
Yeah, I can reverse engineer. That is a long, winding path. But yeah, so right now, today, co-own an agency with my wife, I mentioned, called Mod Intelliky. My wife started Mod. I started Intelliky, merged about 5 years ago. I don't know if that was around the time we had the interview.
I think it was exactly when that was happening. So
Okay.
I remember us talking about that. Yeah.
Okay. Speaking about stressed, but that's a different topic. I started another agency just last year as well. Still kind of doing that quietly. And then I'm putting my toe into sort of the private equity world, looking at buying a company.
Ooh,
Entrepreneurs. So
Very
nice.
cool.
you got to do lots of things.
So the agency, can you talk a little bit about what kind of agencies and that kind of stuff? Because I think that makes
Yeah, no, that's that.
Rounds out
So
the story
we
some.
are a B2B agency. I started Intelliky 15, 16 years ago, primarily serving B2B, primarily tech companies,
For our listeners, B2B means he's a business that sells to other businesses.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good call, Leo.
Yes. Great.
Leo.
Yep.
Leo.
Yep.
Leo.
Fire, Leo.
Yes. I'm usually pretty good at getting out of buzzwords, but
No, that's one of my favorite hobbies is just to.
It's a great point. Usually I'm that role, so I do appreciate it. Yeah. So yeah, clients are like Dell, SAP, Lenovo, Akamai, a lot of large tech infrastructure companies. And so I've been in tech for 25 years. And so yeah.
Austin's a great place
What
to be.
business do you sell to those businesses on the IntelliKey side? And then we'll get into the mods.
Well, yeah. So now they're together. Marketing services are usually around digital transformation. And so helping kind of the revenue function, sales and marketing. How do they update their practices? Because surprisingly, tech companies are still kind of stuck in the past.
Wow.
When it comes to like sales and marketing, they're really good at like product innovation.
That's interesting.
But their actual like go to market, which is sort of my specialty, is not really updated. And
so sort of the product's great, but they're still trying to sell it the same way they sold the last product. But that it's a new product, so why would you necessarily do that?
Well, that makes so much sense because, as we know, a lot of founders start off in tech, but they've got no sales background. They've got none of that. So it's just, if you build it, they will come attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that grows on to bigger corporations as well. They can have issues along the way. So.
It is, yeah. So the irony is, I'm now competing against where I first started at Accenture. Many obviously we're much smaller, but we're starting to run up against them at the low end, and so nice. I feel like I'm going all the way back.
Nice, nice.
I want to hear about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's your wonderful segue into and then in high school.
Yeah. Oh, wow. High school. Yeah. So.
And some people go even before high school, so feel free to go.
So it's important to have documentation. So I go back to I had a little book, I think it was junior high, and write down what you want to be when you're older. And I wrote two things, which was veterinarian.
Aww.
At one point I wanted to be a vet.
Yep. And actor.
Yes. Love it.
Yes. And if I go back to, me back then, I loved animals. I like science. I was pretty practical. And so I wanted a good paying professional job. If I were I was going back to my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was also, of all things, in like an acting group, and I was like super into it, and I like comedy. And so I'm like, I'm going to do it. It was or not and, but now I would go and write like and, right. And talk to my son, like my son wants to be like 4 different things.
How old is he? 7. Okay.
But that's it. Yeah. So, anyway, so yeah.
What are the 4 things he wants to be? Put you on the spot, Dan.
Well, yeah, no. So, I should say in one area that he already says he's going to be a professional soccer player until he's 37.
Oh,
37 specifically.
That's amazing.
That is the average age when that's when they start to retire. Yeah.
And knowing him, he's somehow dialed into that. I don't know how. And then he wants to run businesses.
Cool.
And, but he also wants
private equity run businesses or just like entrepreneur.
He just says like, what does Jeff Bezos do?
He's 7.
Okay.
Okay.
He's 7.
But he's like looking at mom and dad owning their own businesses. You don't have your own bosses. Like you are your own bosses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's cool.
Yeah, no, it's right.
To see.
And then there's that one. He wants to do Olympic sports. I guess that's another job, but he wants to do 4 different things. Ninja gym, which is not a current sport.
Ninja gym.
Soccer, tennis, and the 100-meter dash.
Ninja.
Wow.
Oh, like All American Ninja?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Obstacle course stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's super into it.
What was the 4th one after tennis?
100-meter dash.
100-meter dash.
Because he saw Noah Lyles and he's really fast, so he wants to do that.
That's so cool.
I love that.
He's got a lot, and I'm always like, run free.
Anything you want.
This is something that I really enjoy. Is you talk to someone who's 7, 8, 9, 10, and they want to be 10 different things, 5, whatever. Or they have, there's no, and then something happens. I don't know what it is, because you talk to an 18-year-old and they're like, I don't know. And all of that excitement is gone. And all of that possibility is gone. And I don't know, do we do it to ourselves? Do we do it to that? Does society do it to us? I don't know, man. But like because the world is that possible.
It's literally, this is where a lot of me starting to think about the things that we're working on today happened when my daughter was 13. She started, universities started, agents used to visit the high schools and start kind of putting it, you got to come to this, you got to do this. And so do it
this way, and you have to plug in here, so you have to look like this.
I remember my daughter coming home crying, dealing with her, and she was crying. I was like, and she was just so stressed. She didn't handle stress very well. She's 13. Didn't handle stress very well. She's like, I don't know what to do. And just didn't feel like she fit in at 13 with like all these decisions have to be made and I've got to do them now. And I remember saying to her, don't worry about it, honey. You don't have to figure that out today. She's like, Dad, you don't understand. And so if you want to know the heart of where it started, it was that conversation. It was me saying, I've got to be the dad that defends here. And why the hell are we doing this as a society?
Right.
I don't stand for this. Let's figure something else out. So yeah, I think society, and that's part of why we're here, right? We're having these discussions to be like, let's change the message. Let's be more positive. And I'll be happy to tell you that she's now 21 and she's got like 10 things she wants to do. I want to fly a plane. I want to be a scuba diver. I want to like realtor, like all these things. I'm like, go for it.
You can fly a plane pretty easily, honestly.
Go figure it out.
My wife is currently in pilot training.
I mean, I was just
amazing.
implying you could do it once. But.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like I have 4 different jobs and I volunteer. And I just met with one of my cousins who is an actor and he's on the show right now, 1923, the Taylor Sheridan show, like spinoff of Yellowstone. It's filming in Austin.
Yeah.
And he showed me a picture of himself on a horse because he's, I guess, the right-hand man to the sheriff. And I guess it was in between takes, he's on a phone closing a real estate deal while on set. And he's like, yeah, that is just another source of income. And so it was just cool for me to see that you can do it all, but you got to figure out how to balance it mentally.
At one point, I love that. Yeah. At one point, it dawned on me a decade or so ago that I'm doing all this hard work to build one company. And I also have a lot of time on my hands because I'm like, okay, I'm now waiting for this next thing. I'm just sitting here. And then it just dawned on me that it takes as much energy to build because the infrastructure, people, everything else can be very similar to like build a second thing. And it's another source of revenue. And like, why would I do that? So obviously there's limitations, but if you've got the structure down, why not do 2, 3, 4 things? And then you're busier with your life and you've got multiple sources of income and it's fun.
Right.
Keeps you entertained. So, but I'm speaking to the choir. You've done some of that, the combining and the.
Yeah. And you don't know what you're doing until in reverse. Right. But, I've seen, I built my career in a lot of different disciplines, but like what you're talking about, they call it skill stacking from one perspective, right? I mean, obviously there's infrastructure, but I think there's also like certain skills. And if you kind of stack them up, they don't fit a linear pattern. But again, in reverse, you can see like, oh, like I worked at Accenture and I was in IT. And then I'm like, no, I don't like this. Then I went to marketing and it was too fluffy for me. Right. And it doesn't mean it is. It's just I didn't fit my personality. Right. Now I kind of do both, right? And I'm like, oh, I speak tech really well, speak like human pretty well, right? Like not everyone is in those realms, right? And so, I think you're also, I would give you more credit, right? There's probably some skills you have that not everyone can do that in the exact way that you're doing it as well. I think it's infrastructure. I'm not pushing back, but I'm just like, the way I look at that is it's also a skill sort of stacking or like, what do you bring to the table that, allows you to kind of stack all those things up?
Makes sense. Back to your story, because we kind of sidetracked, which is great.
Okay.
Oh, before we move on.
Back to your story.
Wait, stop. I just wanted to add.
See, there's his brain.
I just wanted to add, in the 4th grade, I don't know if we talked about this, like there was 2 things I wanted to be. One was a fireman and the other one was a soccer player.
Oh, I love that. He would have.
So as soon as you step by your son, I'm like, wait a second. It made me go back to think about that about myself.
Right.
It's like firemen, soccer
If you'd
players,
been
those are
more
things-
enterprising, Dan, you could have just set the soccer ball on fire and you could have
That's
done both.
right.
Bingo.
And come up with a logo with a
Yeah.
fire, soccer ball fire. I like
It's nice. Right. I don't know how acting veteran anyway.
it. Right.
Actually, there's a show that's called not Private Practice, but Animal Doctor.
Is it a Dr. Pole?
No, it's with the uncle from Weeds, Uncle Andy.
Okay.
And he played an animal doctor, and that was a show. You could have done that. That was my first thought when you said
Yeah.
There you
Put
go.
it together,
veterinary
right?
doctor.
There's still time.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, right? Like, I don't know if yeah.
But back to the point, that's what you wanted to do at
Yeah.
that age.
Way back when, right? And
Now walk us through the journey of how that changed.
yeah, that is crazy.
Or
right?
developed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I liked, biology, but I was still young. What I was interested in and good at, because I think that's the thing, right? It's good at and interests evolved over time. And so, then I moved from soccer. I played soccer, by the way. Then I moved from soccer to basketball. And then I was really good at math, but then I got like way better at English, right? And so it just sort of, evolves over time. And then I don't know why I sort of lost a little bit of like, I mean, I still love animals, but, and then acting kind of fell off and I was really into like sports. So, like playing basketball. I wasn't very good at it. Ended up going to Duke, which I could foster watching, not playing. And people say like, oh, did you play basketball there? I was like, have you heard of my name? The answer is no. I'm not that good.
I'm that good.
I have to say, when I literally skimmed your bio, I saw Duke basketball, and I thought, oh my gosh, cool, he played for Duke. So
I mean,
people start to believe things.
Sure, I'll entertain that for a bit, right? It's a fun party trick. But no, I mean, yeah, I don't know why. I think I lost it a little bit, right? Like I think I lost the career thing, and it could be institutional, and you're making me think now. But I was like, all right, I don't know what I want. So I'm going to go to the best place I can get into that I like and has basketball. It's literally a criteria, which I don't know if that was the best idea 18-year-old Scott, but
There have been worse. There have been worse.
No, right. And I said, if I can get myself a platform that gives me a lot of flexibility, and that was the best thing I did, I think, right? Then, that'll set me up for, my uncertainty on what I want to do, right? And I think this borne out pretty well. I don't think the same thing is needed now. I think back then I didn't see another option.
Right.
Like entrepreneurship was like, not.
What is that?
Yeah. I mean, my mom had her own law practice, so I saw some of that. My dad was corporate, but they were sort of in their own little institutions. And, and I was always, always had jobs and little entrepreneurial things, but I never labeled it. I was just like, oh, I'm making money just because I need to make money. And, then I'm going to go through this track and go to Duke, and which is great. And I did, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. So that's what I'll stop there, because that was sort of the next evolution, because you have to say, like, what are you going to do? And I was like, doctor.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that sounds, but it was like, well, I don't want, like, my dad's in business. That doesn't seem that interesting. My mom's in law. I did some summer work for her. I'm like, nope.
Not for me.
That's a big note.
Yeah, like mom loves arguing. Cool. Nah, it's not my thing. So
The arguments are great, but the paperwork is tiresome.
100%.
And it turns out you don't get to have a lot of arguments.
Yes, and it's very technical in a way that's super not interesting
And you
to me.
do get to
Right.
do a lot of paperwork.
You do, right? And yeah, it's just brain wiring almost.
What I think is fascinating about this, though, and this is one of the reasons why I started founding Austin in 2016, is because when I saw that connection of what do I want to be, there was the same four things that came up for everybody I talked to. Doctor, lawyer, CPA. Like there's just like, I don't know why it's just those four. There's 800. We learned there's 800 different careers that the labor of bureau kind of.
TWC.
800 of the Department of Labor, yeah.
Department of- there's
Then about
800
another
thing-
1,100.
And then subsidiaries kind of those, or subcategories of those 800 top categories, is like 250,000 different kinds of jobs.
Yeah.
Yet, I didn't see this plethora of choices that really told people about those things. And so that was the reason why Founding Austin started, just because I wanted to go interview entrepreneurs and figure out their path and kind of open up the door, just the visibility for parents and their kids as far as what could be done. But it was just kind of like, here's my stab at it. Here's the change I want to be to make that happen. But it's interesting that you went, like, my dad's in corporate, my mom's a lawyer, I'm going to go to a doctor.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was by exclusion, right? Like I was like, I don't know, it's not resonating. A bunch of people in our neighborhood, like dads or moms or doctors, they're helping people. It's a good living. I mean, again, the sort of the practical side of me took over, but also the helping. And I'm like, not that my parents didn't, but it was just, I had a little more like,
there's a bit of purpose to it.
Right.
If you're a doctor, you can say, I helped someone. If you're a lawyer, you can defend
I helped
or
somebody
whatever.
divorce or something.
Well, indeed. But there's kind of a bit of purpose to it. You know what they do and how they help.
Yep. Yeah. So in my simple mind at the time, right? And but like, I was like, oh, well then that's the stab I'm going to take. I'm going to do that. So I had a college roommate who's now a doctor. And we're very similar, just objectively, like skill and intelligence, and we would take the same tests. I would study twice as hard. He would get an A. I would get a D. I'd never even gotten a B before.
Right.
Wow.
So
something saying I need to change this path.
Well, I kept at it because I'm stubborn.
Right.
And so I stayed at it until I, was in danger of maybe not totally failing out, but,
Strongly being encouraged to reconsider your course choices.
Yeah. I generally, my way of learning is to hit a wall at 100 miles an hour.
And then do it again?
A little bit. Yeah. I've tried to get a little better at that, but it's the upside of perseverance / stubbornness.
Right.
I hear you had such self-awareness though. Like, as the choices were made, it makes perfect sense to me. Like the journey, I'm so on board with it. It makes sense. Maybe you didn't have self-awareness for a while for the grade thing, but then what happened?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. Sort of, the self-awareness, it was just, my parents were like, we're not going to pay for Duke if you're failing. And they were convinced I was not studying.
Aw.
Right. And they always believed me, but they were like, you have always gotten A's and you didn't. And I mailed it in a lot in high school, right? Like I didn't study, I would get an A, and they saw high school Scott, and they're like, and I'm like, it's Duke. No offense.
Different.
It isn't high school.
And they didn't buy it, right? Anyways, so, come junior year, I still hadn't declared a major. I was just like, what do I want to do? So I just went through the major list.
Wow.
I was like, what? Like exclusion, don't like these things. I'm like, what is resonant? And I was like, economics, and I'll get a minor in marketing. And it worked out. Like I ended up getting Dean's List, and like it was the right skill. It was interesting, but like even at Duke, like they don't want to be pre-professional. So they don't have what I would call useful majors, except for in a couple areas. So you learn to learn. And I'm not trash talking, but I'm very practical, right? And so I think there was a certain part that wasn't resonant with me.
Yeah.
And so I made so I did economics. It was good. Everyone in economics went to Wall Street, like everybody. Like there was a giant sucking sound from the economics department to Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, wherever in New York. And I don't know. Even then I was like, man, that doesn't sound super interesting to me. Right. And even they're like, oh, you make a lot of money. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So at the time, I made getting a job my job. So I put this huge binder together, right? Like when I'm doing something, I don't go like halfway. And so
very determined.
I spent all my time in the career services. Like I became best friends with career services. No one else was in there except for me my whole senior year. Right. And like, I helped them with a marketing plan just for fun because I'm like, you need to go out and like market your services. No one
I'm
knows
the only
about
one
you.
here.
Right. So I made it like my job to get a job, and I interviewed with everybody, and I took every rejection letter and pasted it on my wall.
Oh my gosh, I
Nice.
love that.
It's like the VC. It's like a startup world here. It's like, yeah, exactly. Love it.
I'm just a glutton for punishment is really so.
And you
Anyway,
got good at knowing what you didn't like as well.
yeah, but through just trial and error,
Right,
I was like doing
That's a pretty valid approach, honestly.
Mhm.
Like that just go and do it, go and try it. Like just you'll learn something.
Yeah. And so, I still didn't exactly know what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want. And then I think I only had one official offer. My first one was Accenture, and I wasn't super psyched about it, to be honest. Sorry, Accenture. At the time it was Anderson Consulting. But I was like, you know what? I have a good starting place, kind of like Duke. Maybe I was more excited about Duke than Accenture, but and then there was a job, brand management for a wine company that I was super excited because I started liking wine, which I still like now. And I'm like, it's brand management. That's like super fun. I wanted that job.
Tiny little company called Yellowtail or something. Didn't quite work
Not
out.
far off.
Gallo.
Bam.
Wow.
Dude, you'd be a billionaire.
Wow.
Bam. Probably. But yeah. So Gallo, yes. They flew me out to San Francisco, picked me up in a limo
Ooh.
in SFO. I mean, that was pretty good. But I did not get good vibes.
No?
Interesting.
And I was
Was it the limo that threw you off?
no, I wanted the limo was great. The wine was great.
I wanted
The other people were great. The management team.
Hmm.
I just was like, they were like, what fraternity are you in at Duke? And I was like, I'm not. And they looked at me like I had four heads.
wow.
And it wasn't just that, it was just everything. And I was like, I don't think I'm gonna.
But they still sent you the offer letter.
They did not. So I did not officially get an offer, but everyone else there got an offer. And I didn't. I went from, and I have this bad trait. If I don't want
Right.
something, I can't fake it.
Yeah.
And so I just switched.
Right.
And I was like, I just didn't go for the.
That question is a turnoff, though.
Yeah.
What fraternity are you in?
Well, and that's
Wow.
fine. And that's a fine question, right? But it was like an expectation of a specific answer. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that
What was that, like 1990?
I understand the question, but then
96.
the reaction.
The reaction is untasteful. Yeah.
And it was just all the things that sort of flew.
Right.
But I mean, don't get me wrong. That job was that was a dream job because you don't get a brand managing gig out of school.
Right.
And like they were bringing like kids from all over, and it
That was before they acquired like High Noon and all those other.
I guess you know.
alcohol.
Yeah.
I do. I have a friend who grew up with a Gallo kid.
Oh,
Went to school with him.
Gallup.
The son of.
yes. And then there was another one, didn't get it, but it was close. And I just was like, I stopped the interview process with IRI, which was a data company for all the grocery stores. It's still around.
Okay.
So yeah, those were kind of the
So you
three,
went
but
you an Accenture?
yeah, I just went Accenture because honestly, at the time it was the only offer, but I had already gotten it first. So
Right.
everything else was like house money. Right.
Mhm.
So if like, I'm just like,
I got my base.
I got my base, and that's just my brain, right? And so I'm like, all right, I got that as a starting point. Went to Charlotte, North Carolina. Was not my first pick, but yeah. So that was my first, I would say, real job. Although I had jobs all the way when I was younger. I sold golf balls in the backyard. I had a paper route.
It's a very entrepreneurial.
I didn't know that. I actually had to go in reverse. Like I was like, how did I become an entrepreneur? And if I actually track it all the way back, like I worked in a warehouse when I was 14. I worked at Baskin Robbins. I had every job in the world, and I loved working.
Right.
Yeah.
The freedom and all the
Yeah, and just like I liked it.
Yeah.
I still love it. Right. Like
At what point was it from Accenture? What you were telling before the show, and I'd like to kind of re-jump into that. At what point did you have this crisis of identity? Maybe.
yeah, no, that's right. So I was at Accenture. Part of the reason I didn't want to work in Wall Street is you have to work 80 plus hours a week, right? Mandated. And then they say technically you don't now, but
Yeah,
it's all
I know
Especially
some
for
of
the
those
first 2
guys.
years.
You do. You got to put it in.
right. And I don't mind. It's just it was like that was a rite of passage,
Mhm.
and I, as you can tell, I'm stubborn, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't mind working if it's real work, but if it's just like
Just to put in the time,
that's why I wasn't a fraternity. Like, oh, you got to rush and you got to do these things, and I'm like, nah, I'm good.
I'm the same way.
And again, it's just my personality, right? And so, I kind of went through, had a job for, a year and a half at Accenture. And I worked 88 plus hours a week, which was fine to a point. And I don't know, corporate was just starting to chafe even that early for me. Right.
Yeah.
And, just a lot of TPS reports and, that sort of thing. And so, I sat on a plane next to a founder of a company, and I'm talking to him about stuff, and I just start deconstructing his business plan about something he's telling me. And he goes, "Do you want to come to Baltimore to interview?" I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "Well, I'm starting a company underneath my umbrella." And I was like, "I don't know, maybe, sure." And I thought maybe it was a flyer. So, went back to Accenture, and he followed up on an email and was serious about it. And at that time at Accenture, like, I was getting a new role. Timing is important. So I went to Baltimore and interviewed because I'm like, I think Accenture is going to screw me, which they did try. But I had an offer in hand, noticed a trend, right? And
That's so smart.
and so I told my boss before, I was like, I'll literally do anything. Just don't make me do the same thing, but with more people.
Right.
Like, literally, that's all my only request. I will be a team player, but like, don't make me do the same thing, but more of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, guess what? We're promoting you. You get to do testing software again, but with more people. I'm like, literally the only thing.
You're senior testing software guy.
Senior.
Correct. And that's fine, right? I'm just like, here's my resignation.
Right.
So what happened in Baltimore?
It stays in Baltimore.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Baltimore. Yeah. So I was in Baltimore. I had worked for this brilliant guy, about $125 million construction company, was doing a knowledge management software. So back at the time, he was trying to take stuff from all the learnings from all his different construction projects, aggregate them in one place so they don't have to like manually share learnings from this project and that project. And so, great experience. I don't say butted heads because he had more power than I did, but it just didn't quite vibe, right? Like, he wanted me to run a company, and I started like setting things up. Like, I would run it and be an individual contributor as well. In the end, he just wanted me to be an individual contributor.
Right.
And so eventually we just said like, hey, this is probably not going to work out. And so then, good.
No, I was going to say, and then.
Yeah. And then I was like, man, this is like, I kind of 0 for 2 in like a pretty short period of time on like, I was like, I'm going to take this skills assessment. I found on the internet thing called the Highlands program. It's like a 5-hour assessment, and it's like fine motor skills, gross motor skills, analytical ability, writing ability, like, personality tests. Like, it was an organizational psychologist, right? And I paid like, I don't know, like $1,000 or something. At the time it was a lot of money. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but it was a lot of money out of my own pocket just to say like, like, what am I doing? What should I be doing? Like, I'm having trouble finding my way. Like, that's the way, and it was pretty, I mean, I was severely like depressed at the time, right? Like, very depressed.
I was going to say, like, when you went sort of separate ways from that construction company, did that feel like you had failed?
Yes.
Yeah, like in your mind, you're like, oh God, like I don't fit anywhere.
Well, I failed twice, right? I mean, not fail, but like,
in your mind.
I just didn't fit. And I'm like, I'm a total, which I am a misfit. Now I'm okay with it.
Right.
But then I'm like, I'm a misfit. That wasn't the wording. I'm like, like I failed, right? Like, and so I had a total identity crisis, like breakdown, right?
And how old were you?
24.
Okay.
What I thought was really cool is he goes and is like, does this test, which is amazing because it helps you then, at least gives you that
Gives you some direction.
It did. It gave me some objectivity because my parents, bless them, they're like, you can do anything. And I'm, I like in my core, I have good ego strength, but I'm like a human like anyone else. And so I was kind of beaten down, right? Like I didn't do well. I thought I was gonna be a doctor, failed. Accenture, like all these other people are doing corporate, right? I'm starting a company underneath someone else. Didn't work out. I was like, oof, like, I'm just tracking all this. And I like did not feel good about it. So I wanted to test, and, it was helpful because I'm like, I knew I had some skills, but it gave me a little bit of an objective baseline who aren't my parents and who aren't someone else. And I didn't have like a mentor or anyone else like shepherding me. Right. So like I felt kind of alone and there weren't a lot of resources.
Right.
And that you were saying before the show that actually did help you at least start kind of aligning your stars, which one of the things that I believe in, just because I've seen it in people, is, and I've talked about this in the show before, is I think we all have a gift inside, and it's up to us to try to figure that out. And that's this journey of the education and figuring it out. And at some point when it does click, you're like, it's like music. It starts singing. You're like, okay, I'm in the zone now. And so, but it's work to get that. And it sounds like this, at least this was part of that process.
Yeah, no, it was a lot. It was a lot of stress. And actually that whole process is what led me to Austin, which has been amazing, honestly. So I reach out to and this is something else I did, right? And I feel pretty good. This is a good strategy. At that point, also, as I was thinking, I was like, I was in Charlotte. I didn't love Charlotte. No offense to Charlotte. Baltimore, same. Like it just wasn't a good fit for me, right? And I grew up in California. And so, I was on the East Coast. I'm like, I think I'm done with like the Eastern Seaboard generally. Right. Like people and cold and all the things. Right. And so I picked cities that I wanted to live in and targeted the cities and then click down and say, I'm going to find a job in one of those cities. I'm going to narrow. So it's like Denver, Austin, bunch of California places. I kept Atlanta because I'm like, maybe like just to be realistic, is kind of my safety. Yeah. Like, I'm in Charlotte and Baltimore and also, that's, it's a little warmer, a little more progressive, big city.
I love that you do that. We talk a lot about beginning with the end in mind, and that even the city is a point of contact. Where do I want to end up? And this, because all these decisions kind of help you figure that piece out.
Yeah. And I think a lot came from, I say failure, but when I was getting jobs where I wanted jobs at Duke, I wanted a tech job, and Duke at the time was not quite a national school, and tech companies were not recruiting there. So I couldn't find, I was not successful finding a tech job because there weren't a lot of alums.
Right.
And then I realized, like,
this is back in an age where basically the recruiter hired all of the people that went to the same university as them or whatever, right? Like
it was just much more regional, right? And I still, in retrospect, still region and location is something I way undervalued as a thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it wasn't the way my brain worked, but I realized like all those connections and relationships is key. Right. And so, picking the college, like where do you want to live?
Right.
And again, it's not forever, but it's just a factor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. I know we want to get to the second part of this, but before we do that, I do want to ask one question as far as like up until that point, mentorship wasn't an issue, or wasn't something that was big on your radar. But after that, obviously, you've had mentors, you've been a mentor, you currently are in EO, which is an organization that helps other entrepreneurs. Let's just kind of talk about that for a second.
Yeah. Fast forward, I've been, it's a global organization, entrepreneurs organization. I think it's up to 50,000 worldwide. There's one in each city. I'm on the board of the Austin group, about 220 entrepreneurs. But there's a whole mentorship program that's part of EO, where basically other entrepreneurs mentor other entrepreneurs, right? And it is a whole peer mentoring program in general, right? And it's been a lifesaver. I've been in for 8 years. But I've been both a mentor to and not just younger entrepreneurs, but like I would say smaller businesses that are just a different part of the life cycle. And now I'm being mentored by someone who's already exited their company. And so, it works both directions, but it's been an amazing one. And I'm not a joiner, as you can tell, like not a fraternity person, and that's fine. But like EO is amazing, right? Like I found my tribe. It only took me 42 years, but yeah, I'm there.
The experience, though, just so that our listeners know, I mean, the whole point of this is like, there's this kind of fog that we're all trying to get through. And at certain places you get tested, and that helps you. You figure out the city, that helps you. You figure out an organization that really helps you. These are just like points of boost in life.
Yep.
So would you talk about just how that impacted you, like when you joined or when you started having some mentorship, how that impact how things came together after that?
I think for one, it helped give me more context and confidence. And at the same time, it made me, open my eyes to things that were a blind spot, right? Is what I would say. It's both at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Dialectical.
Yep. Yeah. Not to get too technical, but there's a whole thing called Johari's window, and I won't get into it. I know.
But like briefly get into it.
Yeah. So basically it's a tool for identifying blind spots.
Like personal blind spots.
Or professional.
Okay.
Right. And so things that, you don't know what you don't know, really is that concept. And that framework, it's just one, but that's what EO has done for in general, right? You have a bunch of very motivated, compassionate, peers in the same spot. And it's called a forum. There's about a group of 8 to 10 entrepreneurs you meet with every month. And, they'll call you out with kindness, but they'll also support you. And having that, both the tool and that group is a real game changer.
It's so cool.
Really cool. I hadn't heard that term before. Love it though.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, the other thing I wanted to talk about is whenever you were a mentor, as you've been or being receiving mentored, is the willingness, because I think so many people, especially at a younger age, kind of feel like my time's not worth it. They're so busy. They're not, and I've found that nothing is further from the truth, that everybody wants to pass. It's like our duty to pass on what we notice to the next generation. So
yeah. No, and I would say that, and try not to be afraid to reach out, right? Because in general, I find that, the mentor gets more out of it. And I think especially the right mentor, again, when I was coaching other companies, I felt like they were more coaching me as I'm teaching, because some of them are doing things I'm like, I've never heard of that. I've never seen that. Like that. Tell me more, And then certain things I can say, well, let me tell you, I was like, the best way I could do it is like, I've made so many mistakes. That is like, I can share all of my mistakes with you. And that is valuable. And I get it. Right. But it's, you think I'm coming from a place of wisdom. Maybe I am, but a lot of it's just from like the sheer number and like depth of the mistake.
Right. Don't go that path. It's almost, and you've said this before about, you've used the analogy of an onion, but it's like trying to figure out what you want to do, and you can apply this to different things, but it is like peeling that onion back. It's like, I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. So in your trajectory, like this didn't work. This doesn't work. This didn't work. The same thing with failures. I failed here. I failed here. I failed here. You don't need to be doing these things, so we can get closer to that core faster, more efficiency. All right, let's jump into some of these questions since we've got like 10, 15 minutes. And this first one is Sarah.
What I could do right now as, a student on summer break, trying to pay rent and all of the rest of her bills, to have, something good on my resume, have good experience, guide me in the right direction for like future jobs, but also still making enough money. Because the main problem is the jobs that I could get right now do not pay as well as the restaurant does, which is scary.
So Sarah's got a restaurant job and is trying to say, what would look good on my, like, restaurant pays my bills. I got a summertime. What could I put on my resume and still earn enough money Like what path should I take in this? Thoughts?
So the way I'm looking at this is, I think there's two ways. If you have an idea of what your next step is, how do you reverse engineer that next step? You don't have to know the ideal situation, right? Maybe there's an industry, right? Like, try to network to move towards that. Yep. I would say network is the number one, like applying for, jobs. Your resumes is fine, but, most of my jobs and most of the new business I get is all through people I know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that still holds very true. Right?
100%.
That said, restaurant jobs, if that's close to an industry, honestly, I mean, the way I look at it is I don't care as much, right? If that happens, you want to move into hospitality or, there's some transferable skill. I mean, I think restaurant jobs are perfectly valid. Again, if you want to be a biomedical researcher, I get it. That's probably not the right, path, but I don't see it as a bad stepping stone, if that makes sense.
Right. 100% agree. And I love that you brought up the networking thing, because that's the first thing I would, given in her situation, given what I know now, and say, here's where I want to go. The first thing I start doing is identifying people that are in close enough ranges to that and buying them coffee, saying, hey, here's what I want to do. What opportunities do you know of? Because you don't know until you're not going to find it on the internet. You're not going to find it behind a phone, and it's not going to be posted. It's going to be, I know Leon who knows this person at this place, and I'm really cool with Leon, so let's go have coffee, Leon.
There's also a value in networking while at a restaurant job. Like, I was a bartender and worked at a restaurant in New York for 8 years at Brother Jimmy's Barbecue, and I got the job from somebody that I knew. And not only do I still have the female relationships of the women that I worked with to this day, but so many of my regulars that would come in are still dear friends of mine in all different facets of their careers or different industries. And like you, Dan, you're so good at knowing people at restaurants. I networked at work all the time, and it has served me very well. So she could certainly use the restaurant as a networking hub.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's valid. And anywhere you're at, just be friendly. Well, I've hired people from restaurants that I just develop relationships. I love how this person, you're always observing, like, this person does this person does this person does this, and you get to chat. And I typically, if I see that, then I'll say, ask inspiration. What is your aspiration? Where are you trying to go? And if there's some alignments in what they're trying to do, I've literally, placed people in that situation. Say, okay, let's, this person, let me get you in contact with this person. Then that turns into a career. So I'd say, but once again, networking, using that voice and being friendly. And again, back to what Mama said, never burn bridges and always be nice. And just, those are the kind of things that pay off in the long run. How about you, Leon? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm I'm taking a step back a bit, right? And I'm thinking, here you are as someone who's gone through the education system that absolutely does not encourage you to talk to the person next to you. Do not go into the wrong class and talk to somebody else. Stay in your lane, stay in your grade, stay within your peer group. And university too, to a certain extent, is getting busier and busier and enables you to actually live a life there less and less. And everything is very institutional. Where are you going to do? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? That's not the way it's done. You need to look like this. And it was just interesting, right, that university, the advice from all three of you there was network, because that's the piece that's sort of missing. Unless there is an institution that's going to, hand of God, this is your calling, just trust me on this. And you're just going to do it. Aside from that, you do have to kind of figure it out. And a big part of figuring it out is just having people around you, in all forms, whatever that is, whether it's long friendships, regulars, like life hands opportunities from strange places, strange, like enormous deals will come from random conversations, right?
Got a job on an airplane.
There you go,
right.
Instead of just ignoring them, right? And I suppose I was just reflecting to myself to some extent how hard that is now as Gen Z, especially those who have come through the pandemic, where you weren't even allowed to be in the same room as someone who wasn't in your immediate family, you know? And social media doesn't help because it makes, you know, you go to the top ranked person, like it's an institution and it creates a way of doing things, and it does a lot of good, but it doesn't bring you those network up. It's a one way, it's an influencer or whoever, it's Mr. Beast or PewDiePie, and right. And you subscribe to them and everyone gets the same advice, right? He's not doing you, viewer 9,327 any favors. He's not doing to anyone else, at least, right? Or she or whatever. But so I don't know. It was interesting that's the piece that's missing, right? It's the mentorship. It's the networking. Like that's the one huge institution that isn't an institution in modern day. And so I don't know, because all three of you said networking, and it's tough. And you may really struggle to do that in a job. You know, like I was thinking to myself, I'd keep the job and start trying to find coffee mornings that some group has, or some evening thing. You know, like weirdly, I just came from a meetup where we were talking about meetups, and we were all just comparing all these different meetups we go to, and like it's not like any one of them is revolutionary or world changing,
but you're doing something,
right? And things come from them, right? And then something is like you have a chat with someone on a plane or whatever, and then a few emails later, and something else, and then this job thing, and now you do have a new job, right? But it's not, nothing's fast, nothing's quick, nothing happens the way it seems to on social media or in the movies or anything else, because you don't have time to show 6 months of back and forth or whatever it was, right? So anyway, that was just where my brain went.
I think you got time for one more. Let's do this.
You could ask anybody in the world a question. Who would it be first?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of my favorites. What would you ask him?
What's the best way to handle a work and life? Like basically, he does like all this kind of NASA stuff and all these interviews. Like, how would you handle going out it through your day-to-day life, and how you, I don't know, get asked so many questions but able to deal with the fact that even though you're one of these most famous people ever and also all the science stuff, you're able to still deal with personal stuff and go through like any kind of stress and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting. So visible to people, really, really busy. How do you handle the stress of work? How do you handle the stress at home? I know someone that had a business with their wife at some point.
They say never mix.
Yeah. It's a good question, right? And I think, man, if I would go in reverse, right? Like, how do you learn how to get a job to some extent, but how do you even just have life skills and have a job? Right? I mean, I'll lie. It's still hard every day, right? So I think for me, I look at it in terms of seasons, right? I think there's certain seasons where work may predominate. And I think it's important to think of that as just maybe a moment in time.
Yep.
And then other times where family is first and foremost. And,
sometimes you don't get the choice of when either. Like,
right.
Health, blah, blah, blah happens. All of a sudden, I've got to focus on this.
Yeah. So, for me, there may be a methodology. I think it's just a recognition as much as anything else on how to kind of ride the wave, if you will. Well,
that's interesting. And it kind of made me think about, earlier this year, us having to figure out calendars, because we've got 3 different calendars, and we got work calendars, and you've got other things you're doing, and we've got other things we're doing, and we got guests that are coming in, and it's how do you balance all that out? But in that, we all have our personal calendars as well. So here's the things that are important to me outside of this, and that we're going to do, and we're just not available at that point in time. So just kind of finding the holes in between. But it is this. I completely agree with the seasons. I mentioned this in a show before, but sometimes when you try to throw everything into a day, and you feel like I'm failing because I'm not able to do this, and this today, and social media, or look at the others and they're doing all these things, and I know I should be, exercising first thing in the morning, or just like all these things, and it just adds more stress. And it reduces sleep and all that kind of stuff. But having the seasons to say, I'm going to do this segment out, whether it's a day or week or whatever. And so I totally understand where you're coming from there. And life does seem to come not in 24-hour days, but in segments of time where I'm going to really focus here, run really, really hard. And then that's going to take its time to do its thing. And I can focus on something else. And as I mentioned before, sometimes you don't have a choice. You just have to be able to be flexible to be like, all right, thought I was going to do this, but I need to get this done because it's priority. So it's constant rebalancing, reprioritizing.
Some part of me thinks though that I think it's almost misleading to think of a work-life balance. I think that's an old concept of a job. It's a 9 to 5, and I go to work and I have my professional life and that stays at work, and I go home and I have my personal life that stays there. One, that's not really how jobs seem to be anymore, because my boss does expect me to answer, some notional boss expects you to answer an email at 9 p.m., right? Like that's a thing. And so that's kind of dissolved. But also it's like another way of thinking about some of what both of you are touching on there. Like I think about thriving, right? I think about, I want to try and live a life where I thrive. And there are a lot of different things I have to worry about to do that. And so my focus on what I'm trying to improve will move, right? It might be my job, might be, hey, I need to improve my job. And you get your job to a better place. And you're like, okay, I need to come back and think about my family life now, my personal life or whatever. And or my fitness. Like, hey, I've kind of let my fitness side, I need to come back and dump. And so this, thriving, you don't hold all things at once, right? You kind of tend to move, the focus of what you're doing moves around. And sometimes you need just a break. Right. Or sometimes you're like, I'm going to make time for this because I enjoy it. And there has to, at the end of the day, has to be some joy in life. I hate those things like give up coffees and you'll be a bit, like, no,
I love my coffee.
like give up the tiniest delights that you still find in your life so you can scrape together an extra more $5 a day. That's not going to be the difference. Right. And so I think about thriving and focusing on trying to spend my time thinking about how I can focus on things that are going to help me thrive. And somebody else looking in can decide whether I am working or playing in whatever it is I do next. They can look in and say, is Leon having fun or is Leon working? But what I'm trying to do is apply my energy in a way that I can live a thriving life. And so coming back to Neil deGrasse Tyson, of all people, I was not expecting him to go to, but hey, whatever, right? Like, I'd imagine the way he gets that done, assuming he has balance and functional life and relationships, because everything can seem perfect from the outside, but assuming that's true, is that he probably finds a lot of fun and play in the things that may seem like work to me and you, right? And in that sense, it's much easier to thrive in those spaces. It is.
One of the things that you reminded me of in what you just said also is, yes, balance or yes, 100% agree on that. But there is something that we can all do, which is identify time wasters, identify things that really don't bring value to your life, because you'll be surprised how much time you find in those things. What else can I be doing that's more productive?
Or that brings me more joy.
I will often do social media diet. Like I just will not, and
you only eat the celery equivalent of social media. Is that what it is?
Exactly. You pull me to it.
Still got that MySpace account.
Exactly. But that's been said on our show before, though, right? Because, and then sometimes it's like, right before bed, I want to just like see what everybody else is up to, and but I know I'm going to spend a dedicated half hour, an hour doing that. Or I might just say, I'm going to discipline to this half hour because then I want to go do something else. But if I don't do that, it could be like an hour and a half, and like, what did I just do? And is this what I wanted to be doing? Did I buy this from other things? And so that's something that I've constantly have to be going back to and just measuring, am I spinning this up? Because I have all these other things that I do want to accomplish that bring a lot more value to my life. And so leaving that to the very end makes a lot of sense for me. And I think when I have talked to others, i.e. my daughter, and I see how much that does pull from her sometimes. And then she'll like, well, I don't have time for this. Well, I don't have time for that. I'm like, do you? Like, you really do. We all have 24 hours. It's just where you choose to prioritize. Just like take a look at that. So
I would also just say, give yourself grace, because there is, and others, give others grace too. If you're in a season of very big commitments and time commitments and busy things, give yourself grace. I think I'm trying to talk to myself right now.
Right.
Right after this, I'm due at the theater and I'm in a show right now and I'm doing the podcast and during the day I got to get my work done. So give yourself grace.
She comes in as a host / therapy.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't this all a little therapy?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing insights, background, your story. I loved it. I thought that was, every time we get together and chat, there's always something I learn. So it's been great. Thanks.
Likewise. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Super insightful. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Uncharted, Your Sidekick for Life. A huge thank you to Scott Thomas for joining us and sharing his inspiring journey through entrepreneurship, life transitions, and everything in between. I loved hearing about how Scott started in tech, built his agency with his wife, and how he continues to balance all the different aspects of his life. It's a reminder that our paths are rarely straight, but they can still lead to amazing places. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review, and we'll catch you next time on Uncharted, Your Sidekick for Life. And as always, keep pushing forward, stay curious, and don't be afraid to explore the uncharted.